As we continue with the Grail, we're going to take a look at another book now, which is a very fascinating book. As you see here, this is the Celtic tradition. And all of this book goes through the male myths and mysteries of the Celtic tradition. And it is quite a bit based on Carl Gustav Jung and the Jungian archetypes that are represented in here. But the Grail Castle is the very first chapter. And of course, that naturally would get to what we had talked about in listening to Wagner. In fact, here's one of the illustrations. Parsifal approaches the Grail Castle. Parsifal approaches the Grail Castle. That takes us back to Wagner's opera. Now, when you go through this entire book, it's divided into two parts. The first part is the Grail Castle, then the warrior, the lover, the magician, the king, and discovering your archetypes. Part two is the land of youth, the ancient journeys, the shaman's quest, the gods of earth and sea, the sacred wound, the enlightenment of Finn McCool, and then the appendix, write your own personal myth. And then they have, of course, an appendix at the end, index, at the end, which is quite good. It does give information according to that tradition. So you will find this very interesting because it also includes a lot of other poets and other disciplines and other religious traditions as well. And much quotation goes on in here. And after every chapter, they will give notes of sources they use in those chapters, which are very, very helpful. So this is the particularly Celtic tradition of the Grail. And that book in itself gives you that particular point of view of this. And of course, no matter what chapter you're in, you are always going to find something about the Grail and the Grail Castle, because that's the basis of this entire book. And of course, our basis has been to learn about the Grail from these books as well. And as I told you before, perhaps the best of all of them is this one by John Matthews, the Elements book. They pick only the best authors for that. And this one has an index as well, as you might expect, and notes. But what is most interesting about this is that when it goes through all these, it goes through all of them with beautiful illustrations, as you can see on both sides here. But it's a history of the entire Grail itself. And this is all about that entire section. And then the Wasteland and the Wounded King is a particularly good one because that has much to do with the Parsifal legend as well. And you will find many poets in here as well as illustrations. And as I say, this man was chosen for this book because he is particularly discovering what they consider the very best historian of that entire period of time. So this one, perhaps among all of them, other than the Arthurian Tarot, would be the best to read. Now, the Grail is undiscernible because it has so many traditions, so many myths, and so many challenges. But it is what we might consider one of the best myths and or symbols of what everyone is questing. Why do we want the Grail? Why do we want it open? What does it give us? Where does it come from? And where do we go once we have it? These are questions about the Grail that we all have to face eventually.